All right, today we're going to do something kind of different. We're going to do a comparison with the MT Pro and the Pico. This is the 4425 4-channel Pico scope. So we're going to take a waveform with the MT Pro, save it, and then I'm going to tear all this down and set up the Pico and capture the exact same waveform, and then we will go to our screen view where we will go through and take basic measurements on this waveform using both software, so that way you can see the differences between the couple $1,000 Pico scope and the under $500 MT Pro. At least at this time. Right now it's under $500. I wouldn't expect it to stay there if people start to realize the value of this tool. I would expect it to be more expensive. I sure wouldn't sell mine for any less than double what I paid for it. But that being said, I will. I'm gonna do. Well, we got it set up right now to capture a fuel pump waveform. So I've got a fuse loop right here. We're just gonna put an amp clamp on it and capture that waveform, and then I'm gonna set up the Pico. You can watch me capture that waveform, and then we will go to the screen view so you can get a better idea of how we manipulate that software. And we'll do the MT Pro. I'll go through measuring the fuel pump RPM and the current draw that the fuel pump has, and analyzing the waveform, and then we're going to go through it on the Pico software as well. So if this is something that interests you, stick around. It's going to be kind of interesting to see the differences between a high-level Pico scope that's a very expensive tool and a very cost-effective tool. So I'm going to try to make this as efficient as possible. So stick around and see what you think. All right, setting the MT Pro up. I have just this amp clamp here on channel 1. I'm going to go ahead and select the custom clamp. It's going to be this one. And we're going to make sure it's on recorder. Hit start. We're on a 20-second window. I'm going to turn that on and 0 it. And it is hooked to my fuse loop at the fuse box for the fuel pump, and now I'm going to start the vehicle. And you can see what that looks like. And we have the sampling rate set on 50,000 samples per second, which should be a more than reasonable amount of time or amount of samples to get an accurate waveform. And it looks like we've got an average of about 8 amps. Yeah, maybe a little closer to 7. So we're just going to we've got about a minute of time on there. I'm going to go ahead and stop that, shut the vehicle off, and then save this. That's saved. So now we're going to shut this down and get the Pico set up. All right, we got the Pico set up to do the same fuel pump current waveform. We're going to set up our probe on 20 amp mode. Bring this down a little. And we're going to set this up for, let's say 2 seconds per division. That's going to give us 20 seconds on the screen, same as the MT Pro. And I'm going to turn that on and 0 it. We'll stop it. Actually, I was wrong. 2 seconds per division. And we're going to start that. We'll zero our clamp. That is on the fuse loop in the same position. You can see that's a similar waveform. Same thing, right around 7, maybe 8 amps. That's what that looks like. So we're going to take about 20 or 30 seconds of this waveform, and then we're going to pause it, shut the vehicle off, and save it. That's probably enough. So we're going to go ahead and save this. We got that saved. So now I'm going to go ahead and pack everything up, and then we will go to just the screen recording, and I'll talk over while we analyze these waveforms so you can see how we utilize the software with the Pico and how we utilize the MT Pro software, because they're both pretty different from each other, but they're both extremely effective. So we'll get to that here in the next part of this video, so stay tuned. Okay, so now that we have our waveforms captured on both the Pico and the MT Pro, the main thing we want to do here is we just want to get a look at the waveform and get a look at the approximate speed of the pump and the approximate current draw of the pump. And we can already see that all I have to do is put my arrow over the waveform, and then down in the lower left hand corner I can see my Y and my X axis values. So the X is in time and the Y is in current. So you can see we're pulling about 7 amps of current. And now I want to zoom in on this and see if I could pick out a spot where I can tell is one full rotation of the motor, so I can guesstimate the RPMs. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in really far. So maybe from here to here. That seems like too slow. So let's zoom in a little more. See if we can pick out one that's very repetitive. I like that. So that looks pretty repetitive to me, since these are both kind of higher humps and higher current pulls. And you can see we have about 50 hertz. And if we times 50 times 60, so 50 hertz is 50 events per second. And if we take the 50 events per second and times by 60, we get our events per minute, or revolutions per minute. And 50 times 60 is 3,000, so we have roughly 3,000 RPMs. I hope that makes sense. And what's really cool about this program is we can just double tap here with the double left click and see our RPMs calculated out. Now this won't be accurate if the oscilloscope settings are on 720 for an engine cycle. It's going to change our RPMs. We're going to have to cut that in half. So it's something to pay attention to, that our oscilloscope settings are on 360. And you can see we're right at 3,000 RPMs. So that's really all the data we need from that. It's not a great looking fuel pump, but it does work and does perform properly. It's pulling the expected current through a 20 amp fuse. And 3,000 RPMs is pretty reasonable for a fuel pump speed. So we're done with the MT Pro. Let's go to the Pico and see if we can get the same data and the same measurements off the Pico. So we got the Pico open, and so first thing we need to do is where we at. So we got 8, we know we're around 7, and if we just want a value, we can just hold our left click and you can see our time and our value. So we're about 7.5 amps. So somewhere between 6 and 8. So that's really easy to pull up. And then we're going to go ahead and zoom in on our x-axis until we have something we can pick apart. And then we can drag our cursors over like that. And you can see in our window here that we have almost 50 Hertz, almost 3,000 RPMs. So, both programs are extremely effective. And you can see, knowing how to use them, we can get through them pretty quick. We've been on this project like 2 minutes, and we've already ID'd our fuel pump RPM, the current of the fuel pump, and analyzed the waveform. Now we know the waveform isn't great, but it's not horrible. There's no major drops in current, and there's no major spikes in current. So we know there's no major short to grounds. We know there's no major opens. Sure, the waveform doesn't look super pretty, but we also, on this same circuit, is one of the battery feeds for the ECM. So we could be getting some noise from that. If we wanted to get a cleaner signal, we would have to go either directly to the fuel pump circuit or maybe at the relay, depending on what the wiring diagram looks like. But the main thing is I wanted to show you the difference in how you use both programs and a comparison between the two. The Pico being several $1,000s and the MT Pro being extremely cost effective at currently it's under $500 to pick one of those up. Which is an extremely awesome value, other than the fact that there's quite a little bit of a learning curve, and if they're available, because they do have to get shipped from overseas, they can be a little tricky to get a hold of. But I'd say it's worth the effort, especially for that price point. I know I wouldn't let mine go for less than double, and I'll probably, as they become available, I'll probably pick up a spare just to put on the shelf and have. But I don't want to discount the Pico because the Pico scope is the standard for a reason. It's an awesome tool. Obviously, in the right hands, you can learn a whole lot about a waveform and analyze just a few milliseconds of data pretty quickly. So I hope you enjoyed the comparison between the two. That we can get into this really in depth. There are some major differences between the two as far as what's capable, but I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other unless you needed an extremely high sampling rate. As you can see with the Pico, our sampling rate's at 2 million samples per second up here in the corner. And when we go back to the MT Pro, we captured this waveform at 50,000 samples per second. Then you can see this is a plenty slow enough waveform that we don't necessarily need the super high sampling rate of the Pico to have a usable waveform. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you like this, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you want to see, and we'll do some more. Thanks.